Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us on the program today. I'm Joke Rogers in Lagos. Here's what's coming up this hour. Roads still blocked after ethnic Serb gunmen in armored vehicles stormed a monastery in Banjka. Speaker of the Canadian House of Commons apologizes for praising an individual who served the Nazi during World War II. Plus, Kenyans outraged over a proposal to extend President William Ruto's term from 5 to 7 years. Thanks again for staying with us, and we are staying with developments out of Serbia regarding the shooting of a policeman inside a monastery in Banjka on Sunday and security forces surrounding the monastery. We're learning today that police are still very much in the area and have retained barricades on roads leading to the monastery. 4 people were killed in yesterday's standoff, among them a police officer and 3 of the attackers. The siege centered on a Serbian Orthodox monastery near the village of Banjka in the Serb majority region, where monks and pilgrims hid inside a temple as a shootout raged. Reports say a group of Kosovo-Serbs positioned trucks on a bridge into the village, shooting at police who approached them before the battle moved to the nearby monastery. Responding to the situation, EU Commission spokesperson Peter Stano said the shootout between the police and the ethnic Serb gunmen proved the need for urgent de-escalation. EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell, who sponsored dialogue since 2013, seeking to normalize ties between Serbia and Kosovo, also spoke to the leaders of Kosovo and Serbia on Sunday. Meanwhile, Kosovo's Prime Minister Albin Kurti has blamed Serbia for financing and sending armed men to Kosovo.
Those countries who recognized Kosovo,
we need to find the way out of the constant crises and go back to normal problem solving through the dialogue. Because the de-escalation is urgently needed, and it was underlined, the need for de-escalation was underlined in a very painful way already yesterday, and days before, and weeks before, and even months before. So EU was very clear when it comes to expectations from one side and the other, what they have to do in order to contribute to de-escalation and embark finally on a path of normal dialogue, when we don't have to deal with crises and dangerous crises like we see now, but when we can help them both to move forward towards the reconciliation and normalization.
Let's move to another hotspot, the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan, where thousands of ethnic Armenians have fled the breakaway Nagorno-Karabakh region. The leadership of the thousands of Armenians who consider Karabakh home say they do not want to live as part of Azerbaijan, and that they would leave Armenia because they fear persecution and ethnic cleansing. Many were seen this morning queuing up for fuel and causing a lot of traffic on the road to Armenia. Many others were seen loading belongings onto buses and trucks as they left for Armenia, where the government is making preparations for thousands of refugees. The ethnic Armenian leadership says it will remain in place until all those who want to leave, what they call Atsak, were able to go. Meanwhile, residents have been urged to hold back from crowding the roads out to allow the evacuation of the injured. Staying with developments in the region, U.S. Senator Gary Peters today met with Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan in Yerevan, Armenia. The meeting took place amongst the security crisis in the Nagorno-Karabakh region. Prime Minister Pashinyan, who is facing calls to resign, has blamed Russia for failing Armenia. He says some unidentified forces are seeking to stoke a coup, and he accuses Russian media of engaging in an information war against him. Russia considers Armenia its ally and remains in contact with its leadership. They've rejected Armenia's attempts to blame Moscow for the situation in Karabakh. Well, Russia certainly has its own issues it's dealing with, and staying with that and the situation between it and Ukraine, Kyiv's military says there was an overnight missile and a drone attack from Russia on the port of Odessa in southern region. At least one woman was injured, with buildings and port infrastructure severely damaged. Ukraine's Air Force confirmed its air defense systems destroyed 19 Iranian-made Shahed drones, 11 cruise missiles, and 2 hypersonic missiles that Russia launched on Ukraine overnight, with the vast majority directed at Odessa. Earlier, Governor of the Odessa region, Ole Kiper, said that a woman was taken to a hospital after a shrapnel injury in the result of the blast wave. State's Emergency Service of Ukraine have released videos showing firefighters extinguishing a fire at a destroyed hotel building in Odessa. Meanwhile, the United States has agreed to jointly produce weapons with Ukraine in a move President Volodymyr Zelensky has called an absolute fantasy until recently. He was making the remarks in his nightly address, where he also praised Ukrainian forces for success in both areas of a 3-month-old counteroffensive, but gave no indication any new movement forward. President Zelensky, who has just returned from a visit to the United States and Canada, says the pact included air defense systems crucial for Ukraine to defend itself from Russia's air attacks. His comments come as Russian forces shelled southern Ukraine's Kherson region on Sunday, killing 2 people and injuring at least 8. And African leaders are not intervening in the Russia-Ukraine war. The latest being Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema, who has called for peace to be restored between the two. President Hichilema was speaking during an interview with Chinese media. He'd been part of the African delegation that presented a 10-point peace plan that calls for ending the conflict through negotiation and diplomatic means and de-escalating tensions on both sides. President Hichilema criticized those in the West who seem to be routinely dismiss Africa's interests and sought to make clear that global crises, both in the past and present, have had a profound impact on the continent.
There must be other reasons that really are not common interest reasons, that somebody or a country would be negative about the African leader talking peace. China is making its own efforts. I decided to take a bit of time to answer this question so I can clear some of the misconceptions, some of the deliberate misunderstandings. I do really think that if you look at the Second World War, Africa was affected. Africans fought in it. Africans were conscripted in that war. And the scars of that war still linger on. We don't want war. We don't want conflict. What we want is cooperation, is partnership, is mutuality, is common value. I repeat, we urge our colleagues, our brothers and sisters, to restore peace and order.
While the Ukrainian president was in Canada towards the end of last week, he offered a heartfelt thanks to the country for its help in the war against Russia, saying Ottawa's aid has helped save thousands of lives. Canada has committed over 8 billion Canadian dollars in aid to Ukraine, including over 1.8 billion Canadian dollars in military assistance since the beginning of 2022. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he would be offering an extra 650 million Canadian dollars in military aid over 3 years to supply Ukraine with 50 armored vehicles. Canada will also send trainers to help Ukraine pilots on Western F-16 fighter jets.
At each meeting, Canada was clear, as we always are, that we will stand with Ukraine with whatever it takes for as long as it takes. And today, we're backing up this commitment with further support. We are shifting our approach to provide multi-year assistance, ensuring Ukraine has the predictable support it needs for long-term success. As part of this approach, I'm announcing $650 million in new military assistance over the next 3 years to supply Ukraine with 50 armored vehicles, including armored medical evacuation vehicles that will be built by Canadian workers in London, Ontario. First, Canada and Ukraine have agreed to engage with G7 partners to establish a working group of eminent persons who will provide advice on the seizure and forfeiture of Russian assets, including of the Russian Central Bank. Second, we're adding another 63 Russian individuals and entities to our sanctions list, including those complicit in the kidnapping of children and the spreading of disinformation.
Staying in Canada, but away from the war in Ukraine, the Speaker of the House of Commons, Anthony Rota, has apologized for praising 98-year-old Yaroslav Hunka, an individual who served in the Nazi unit during the World War II, as a Ukrainian hero and a Canadian hero, saying further, "We thank him for all his service." Mr. Hunka served in World War II as a member of the 14th Waffen Grenadier Division of the SS, according to Friends of Simon Wiesenthal, a Jewish human rights group that demanded an apology. They also demanded an explanation as to how Mr. Hunka was being honored in the Canadian Parliament. The centre said Mr. Hunka's ties to the Nazi war machine are well documented. Mr. Rota took responsibility for what he characterized as an oversight, calling the initiative to extol Hunka as entirely his. Russia has also condemned the Canadian Parliament Speaker's comments, describing it as outrageous. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said in a phone interview that such sloppy attitude towards memory must be preserved in relation to the Nazis, no matter how old they are. This is no statute of limitations for these crimes. Such sloppiness in this memory is, of course, outrageous. We know that many Western countries, including Canada, have raised a young generation that does not know who fought whom and what happened during the Second World War, and they know nothing about the threat of fascism. This is fraught with the fact that fascism will manifest itself here and there, and we now see how it's trying to find its feet in the center of Europe, in Ukraine. This is what we're battling against so hard. We're still in Canada. The row between the country and India over the murder of a Sikh separatist is being felt in Punjab, where Sikhs fear both a backlash from India's Hindu nationalist government and a threat to their prospects for a better life in North America. Just a reminder about the story now. Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a plumber who left the northern Indian state a quarter century ago and became a Canadian citizen, was shot dead in June outside a temple in Vancouver suburb, where he was a separatist leader among the many Sikhs living there. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said last week Ottawa had credible allegations that Indian government agents may be linked to the killing. India has labeled Nijjar a terrorist in 2020, angrily rejected the allegation as absurd, expelled the chief of Canadian intelligence in India, issued travel warnings, stopped visa issuance to Canadians, and downsized Canada's diplomatic presence in India.
Whosoever fights for Khalistan, fights for right to self-determination, rights for plebiscite in Punjab, India perceive those Sikhs as their enemies and they target them.
And staying with the spat between Canada and India, political commentators are warning that there could be more escalation before the situation is resolved. The two countries, whose relations have been fraying in recent years over the issue of Sikh separatists, have since announced tit-for-tat expulsions of senior diplomats and issued tit-for-tat travel advisories. Michael Kogelman, director of South Asia Institute at the Wilson Center, had the following to say about the diplomatic tensions.
I know it's very unusual for a head of government to go public with such explosive allegations against the government, and particularly in the case of India. India, so far as I know, has never been accused of any government in the West, particularly a key Western partner like Canada, of being involved in a state-sponsored assassination. So in that sense, to this point, India's reactions are exactly what one would have expected: the tit-for-tat responses, the expulsion of diplomats, the travel advisory warning. And keep in mind as well, the Indian government it likes to be projected as very strong, confident, nationalistic. So there was no way that India was just going to sit on its hands after these explosive allegations were made. Of course, the best way to resolve it, the most ideal way, which is probably the least likely way to resolve it, is for India to agree to cooperate with Canada in Canada's investigation of this assassination. That has been Canada's core, consistent demand from day one. But India has, as I understand it, not been willing to do so. Whether that's because it feels it has something to hide, or it doesn't trust Canada, or what, we don't know. That's where third-party mediation can be useful from the US or perhaps from the UK or another close friend of both countries. That's the key. I mean, it's too early to look for off-ramps, but I think it's not too early to think about how to ensure that each side does not ascend a few more rungs on the escalatory ladder. Now, this is a relationship that's important for both Canada and India, and neither country wants to imperil the long-term future of the relationship. So I think that the hope is that in due course, cooler minds will prevail, but it could take some time for that to happen.
In the meantime, on Sunday, a group identified as the United Hindu Front staged a protest in New Delhi against Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. They chanted anti-Trudeau slogans as they marched along. On Saturday, India's Federal Anti-Terror Agency said it confiscated the properties of all alleged Khalistani militants whom it accuses of terror activities in India.
बजाय इसके कि कनाडा वो आतंकवादी हमारे हिंदुस्तान के हवाले करता, उल्टा उसने आतंकवादियों का समर्थन करना चालू किया.
And just imagine being hung upside down at an amusement park. It's terrifying. These fun seekers were stuck upside down on a ride for nearly 30 minutes on Saturday. It took a while for maintenance staff to eventually bring down the rise. Eyewitnesses said guests were shouting, "Get us down." Two of the stuck guests reported chest pain and loss of feeling in their legs. The ride remains closed for further investigation. And to the big screens in America, where screenwriters and studio bosses have been striking for months now over job security following introduction of AI technology. Well, they can all go back to work now as a deal has been reached to end the strike, which really began in May this year. The Writers Guild of America says that the tentative deal is exceptional, with meaningful gains and protection for writers. US President Joe Biden has commended the deal, saying it's a testament of the power of collective bargaining. As well as pay and staffing levels, writers had raised fears of AI taking over their jobs. This has been described as the longest strike to affect Hollywood in decades and has cost California's economy billions of dollars.
As with any negotiations,
And reacting to the new deal is film critic and programmer Khalim Aftab, who says strikers were ecstatic on learning of the agreement. The proposed contract is still preliminary, though. The WGA's negotiating committee said it will share details only after it receives final contract language. After that, negotiators will vote on whether to recommend the deal to leadership, which must then decide if they will present it to members for a vote.
as with any negotiations, the first principle agreement has been reached, and now they've said that before it can even go to the members to vote to end the strike, it needs to go to a couple of committees to agree on both the East and West Coast of America, which will happen on Tuesday. They then have to see the legal speak and the information actually put down on a bit of paper, and they'll argue, no doubt, over the exact I's and T's of the contract. And once that's done, they will put the deal to the members. What's interesting is they've even said to their members they can't even talk about the terms of the deal and what's changed until they're happy with what's written down by the lawyers. It's been around 150 days of striking thus far since May. The mood, as soon as the tentative deal was announced, was one of ecstasy. I heard that at certain film festivals there were cheers going on. Also on social media, we saw a vast flurry of tweets. I think a lot of people have suffered because of the strike. A lot of people have been out of work, and news that we might get the engine moving again is just life-saving for so many people.
Let's bring in our Washington, D.C. correspondent, Maria Bird. Maria, great to see you today.
See you as well.
Right, so the president's comment on the deal shows how far-reaching the strike was. How did this impact on the government itself?
Well, the government obviously a lot of times has to get involved in these type of situations. And so we were getting to a place where looking at about 5 months of a strike. And so we were getting to a point where it could have required that the government intervene, because obviously you are impacting the economy, you're impacting a great deal of the operations of the country. And so this was one that they were watching very closely. Unfortunately for the deal, it did not require the government to intervene in the process. And so the president was very congratulatory. He said this is the way bargaining unit agreements are supposed to operate. It is one of the American ways when you think about unionized and employee-employer relationships. And so this is something that I think is a testament. Hopefully we will see by the end of this week a testament to the ability of employees being able to be heard by employers.
And does this mean that Hollywood is open again?
Well, Hollywood is not officially open yet. They have asked, the Writers Guild has asked that all writers and those who are striking not return to work until the agreement is signed. We are probably looking at at least 5 days before we potentially could see Hollywood open again. But that will really be a testament to see what happens on tomorrow when these deals are reviewed. And then obviously once we get to what they're expecting to be by Friday, a signed agreement.
Negotiators still have to read the fine print, Maria, and see how much has been affected or will be affected. Tell us more about this.
Well, the reality is we're talking about new age. If you look at where we are now with the entertainment industry, we're not only talking about motion pictures, television shows, we're talking about streaming. What streaming has had for good or bad, it has had an interruption to the industry. And so this interruption to the industry has required that the writers are requesting new accommodations and new requirements from the way in which they are compensated and the way in which they are provided benefits from their organization, from their corporation. So that is, and we haven't even began to touch on the real crux of this, which is artificial intelligence, which has created a major interruption into the industry. And there are various requirements that the Writer Guild has requested that we will not know the exact details until the agreement is finalized and public, that they are requesting to ensure that they are able to, one, preserve the integrity of the motion picture industry, and two, being able to preserve what they believe is required and is needed for their jobs and for them to be able to successfully write.
And one of the main issues was that the WGA was striking about, these few months is the introduction of AI technology into film writing and so on. What's the update with this deal now on the table?
Well, the update for the deal on the table right now is that it appears as if the Writers Guild was very clear on what was required, which was they were not going to come to any sort of agreement until they were able to address the artificial intelligence piece that we mentioned. And so what we know right now is that they're going to bring this before their legal entities. They're also going to make sure, because remember, the East and West Coast both have areas in which we have studios on the East Coast of the U.S., on the West Coast of the U.S., and they make sure that they accommodate both in both entities. And so that's going to take some time to get through as well.
Thanks again, Maria, for that update. Let's move ahead. British nurse Lucy Letby is facing retrial over an outstanding allegation that she attempted to murder a baby girl after she was found guilty of murdering 7 other infants. The Crown Prosecution Service today announced its decision on whether it will be seeking a retrial against the 33-year-old over 6 counts of attempted murder in relation to 5 babies. Appearing at a Manchester Crown Court via video link from HMP New Hall in Wakefield, West Yorkshire, Letby heard that she will be facing a retrial over 1 count of attempted murder related to a baby girl known as Child K in February 2016, but not the other 5 outstanding allegations. A provisional date for the retrial, which is expected to last between 2 and 3 weeks at the same court, has been set for June 10 next year. Ms. Letby from Hereford sat behind a desk and spoke only to confirm her name and that she could see and hear the proceedings. In another development, still in the UK, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was non-committal when he asked about reports that his government plans to scrap the northern leg of Britain's new high-speed rail due to rising costs. Newspaper reports have suggested that the Manchester to Birmingham leg of the HS2 line will no longer go ahead. When pressed on the issue during a visit to a community centre in Broxburn in southern England, Mr. Sunak refused to comment, but suggested he was committed to levelling up.
There was, teenagers around.
Well, I'm not going to comment on that type of speculation, but what I would say is we're absolutely committed to levelling up and spreading opportunity around the country, not just in the north, but in the Midlands, in all other regions of our fantastic country as well. And transport infrastructure is a key part of that, but not just big rail projects, also local projects, improving local bus services, fixing potholes. All of these things make a difference to people's day-to-day lives, and that's what the government is getting on doing with record amounts of funding.
UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Well, checking on developments on the continent, the government of nearby Benin Republic has ordered an assessment of a fuel storage facilities in the wake of deadly explosion that killed dozens of people over the weekend. At least 34 people were killed on Saturday after an explosion at a fuel depot in southern Benin. The Decentralization and Governance Ministry said in a statement that the order for an exhaustive assessment of all fuel depots is to prevent a similar incident from occurring in other areas. Saturday's incident happened at a depot in a densely populated market in the southern town of Semepoji, near the border with Nigeria. Benin's Interior Minister Alassane Saidu told reporters that 2 babies were among those killed in the incident. At least 20 more people that were injured are receiving treatment in a hospital. Tenure extension seems to be a thing in Africa, the idea being tested in none other than Kenya, where William Ruto is president. President Ruto is currently serving out a 5-year term, but one lawmaker thinks this should be extended to 7. The extension is being proposed by Senator of Nandi County, Samson Cheragi, who belongs to the ruling coalition in the country. He seems to think 5 years may not be enough for President Ruto to go through with his manifesto. The issue is not sitting well with Kenyans. It sparked an uproar and an outrage, with the opposition accusing the government of plotting to abolish the presidential term limits. Kenya's constitution sets a 2-term presidential limit, and any change will require a referendum. And to Burundi now, where President Evariste Ndayishimiye has brushed off reports of a coup holding in the country. He has denied allegations of a military takeover against him while he was away on official assignment. Upon his arrival in the country, the president gave an address to clarify and debunk the narratives of a coup plot circulating on social media, which he blamed on people who have always wanted to paint a bad image of Burundi. Earlier, the country's Ministry of Interior urged members of the public not to pay attention to what he called rumors that distract. Burundi has experienced more than 10 successful and failed coups. Coming closer to West Africa, to Niger Republic specifically, where French President Emmanuel Macron intends to withdraw his ambassador and end all military cooperation following the latest coup. The French president was speaking in the TV interview and said French military operation in Niger is over and that French troops would leave by the end of the year. The military junta, which seized power in Niger in July, has welcomed the move, calling it a new step towards sovereignty. There are about 1,500 French soldiers in the landlocked West African country, helping it to fight Islamist militants. The U.S. also has more than 1,000 troops in Niger, but these have not been asked to leave. The decision by Paris follows months of animosity and protests against the French presence in its former colony, with regular demonstrations in the capital, Niamey. And refugee issues have always been important to the United Nations, as more than 110 million individuals have been forcibly displaced worldwide. On the sidelines of the just concluded 78th UN General Assembly, the UNHCR Deputy High Commissioner for Refugees, Kelly Clements, highlighted the importance of reintegration to achieve inclusion. She emphasized the role of local school systems and national developments in enabling refugees to be able to give back to these communities.
This is not just a humanitarian challenge for the international community, for the world. It's also a development challenge. And this is why, the Global Compact on Refugees, it was about inclusion. It's about what Adriana is saying now. Include refugees into local school systems, national development plans. That's the most affordable, economic way for then refugees to be able to give back to their host communities and invest in the future. And this is what the compact is all about. It's about inclusion. And so for us, for the UN Refugee Agency, we can support through advocacy. Some governments are actually taking serious steps. Mexico is a good example of this, but there are other bright spots in the world where they have decided from the very beginning they don't want parallel school systems for just refugees. They want refugees to be part of the national school system. In some places, I think Uganda is a good example of this, there are refugee schools where Ugandan students are seeking and supporting an education. It's not just about the education, it's also about social cohesion, reconciliation, a way for people to have a sense of belonging and inclusion. And until we can find those political solutions, and that we started talking about in this conversation, we need to take more steps in this way to be able to support host countries, host communities, and local authorities to be able to provide quality education.
Elsewhere now, Italian mafia boss Matteo Denaro is dead. The 61-year-old was one of the country's most wanted men until his capture earlier this year. Denaro spent 30 years on the run before he was detained in January. He was thought to have been responsible for numerous murders. He was tried and sentenced to life in jail in Ossetia in 2002 for crimes including involvement in the 1992 killing of anti-mafia prosecutor Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, and once boasted he could fill a cemetery with his victims. He also oversaw racketeering, illegal waste dumping, money laundering and drug trafficking for the Cosa Nostra organized crime syndicate. Although he had been a fugitive since 1993, Messina Denaro was thought to have been issuing orders to his subordinates from various secret locations. According to local media, he fell into an irreversible coma on Friday at a hospital in the central Italian city of L'Aquila after requesting that he be given aggressive medical treatment. Director General of the UN's Atomic Agency, the IAEA, says Iran will only be able to prove its nuclear program is peaceful if Tehran fully cooperates with the agency. Mr. Rafael Grossi was addressing the 67th General Conference in Vienna earlier today, where he said his organization needs credible assurances. Just last week, Mr. Grossi condemned what he called Iran's disproportionate and unprecedented move to bar multiple inspectors assigned to the country.
Mr. Grossi.
Only full cooperation by Iran and tangible results will take us to the credible assurances that Iran's nuclear program is exclusively. Nuclear energy is safer than it has ever been, and it's safer than almost any other source of energy. This is in large part because of the field's commitment and the role of the IAEA. This year is the 65th anniversary of the IAEA safety standards. Today, the IAEA is using those standards, its statutory mandate, its scientific knowledge and its global reach actively to help protect the environment from the consequences of a nuclear accident. And this is exactly what we are doing in Japan, where last month the control discharge of water started, and the IAEA is performing an independent monitoring, sampling and evaluation of the situation there. To do that, the IAEA has set up a permanent office at the Fukushima Daiichi plant.
It's yet another annual college fair organized by Education USA for young, aspiring Nigerian students to explore their potential in various U.S. universities. The event, which held in Lagos, Nigeria, saw students from various colleges who are seeking current information about studying in accredited universities in the United States with the robust help of over 40 admission officers. Here's more in this report.
You can see the excitement on their faces as they walk into a lineup of various U.S. universities, curious to know more about these institutions that suit their career journey. This is the 22nd Education USA College Fair in Lagos, Nigeria, where students seize the opportunity to ask representatives from over 40 U.S. universities about admission processes.
Education USA is a service of the United States Embassy that is just amazing in terms of both helping Nigerian students go to study in the United States, but also to help our universities engage with Nigerian students in a very structured way. This is a way to provide Nigerian students with a very clear path towards studying in the United States and getting a further education.
Advisor Supervisor at Education USA, Chinenye Owadeleke, explains the network's commitments to ensuring a wide range of higher education opportunities to international students, as well as the criteria for scholarship programs for students with exceptional academic records.
We are also doing 2 sessions on the steps to apply to study in the U.S. as well as how to get a student visa, which is very important. So the U.S. State Department has a special program for high-achieving low-income students. It's called our Opportunity Funds Program. And we're looking for students who can't afford the upfront cost of applying to study in the U.S. We look for excellent academic records, so A's and B's in WAEC. We are also looking for graduate students with a first class or a very high 2-1. They must also be involved in extracurricular activities and must have an ethos of giving back.
Admission officers speak about what makes their universities stand out.
We're ranked number 2 in the U.S. for work experience, internships, and co-ops. So that means that we're really setting our students up for success when they graduate. Like we were just talking about, we do have Nigeria and Ghana are some of our top countries. So we have a really amazing West African community right on campus. And located in downtown Philadelphia, it's just an amazing, vibrant city for our students to study in and live in. It's also predominantly non-white, so it's just a really welcoming community.
In Nigeria, we have a lot of graduates. I've been in Abuja, I've been in Lagos, and I've met a lot of students. They said, oh, I graduated 10, 20 years ago. I met someone here who says, my father went to Washington State University. So if you're looking for a university that has a great network in Nigeria, and you're looking for a great academics and a great environment, then Washington State University might be for you.
After hours of interaction and knowledge gathering, these potential students share their excitement and anticipation about studying in the United States.
Why would I study structural engineering is because I feel the world can be improved in terms of its infrastructure, and I feel I can be the right person to do it with the right resources, which I feel Caltech or the University of Miami can give to me.
The course I want to study is chemical engineering, and it's a difficult course, and a lot of universities don't actually offer it. So when I came for the fair, I checked some universities, they actually don't offer chemical engineering, but I do know that some of the Ivy Leagues like MIT or Brown, they actually offer chemical engineering. So I feel like the US has more options for me to do my course, and yeah, I'm really excited.
With over 430 international students advising centers in more than 175 countries in the world, the US is hoping to attract young, bright minds and provide world-class education to as many as possible.
India's space agency says it has been trying to communicate with its lunar rover and lander to ascertain their current status on the moon, but no signals have been received so far. The Indian Space Research Organization said in a post on social media platform X, as of now, no signals have been received from them. The space agency said that it will continue efforts to establish connection with the lander and rover. The spacecraft landed on the unexplored South Pole on the moon on August 23, making India the first country to do so. Meanwhile, a NASA space capsule carrying the largest soil sample ever scooped up from the surface of an asteroid streaked through Earth's atmosphere on Sunday and parachuted into the Utah desert, delivering the celestial specimen to scientists. NASA Planetary Science Division Director Laurie Glaze said at a news conference that NASA's first ever asteroid sample return was incredible. The gumdrop-shaped capsule released from the robotic spacecraft Osiris-Rex as the mothership passed within 67,000 miles of Earth hours earlier, touched down within a designated landing zone west of Salt Lake City on the U.S. military's vast Utah test and training range. The final descent and landing shown on a NASA live stream capped a 6-year joint mission between the U.S. Space Agency and the University of Arizona. It was only the third asteroid sample and by far the biggest ever returned to Earth for analysis, following 2 similar missions by Japan's space agency ending in 2010 and 2020.
And the support that we are providing to the science.
And finally, on the program, cooperation between Nigeria and China is growing stronger by the day, all thanks to China's offer of opportunities to keep improving the Nigerian economy and the people. The height of the partnership and cooperation was highlighted at the celebration of the National Day for both countries, as well as the Mid-Autumn Festival and inauguration of the 4th session of the Chinese Enterprises Association established in Nigeria. Our correspondent Amarachi Ubani reports.
China is at least 9,903 kilometers from Nigeria, but that is no hindrance for the Chinese in the country to commemorate the festivals and events just as they would have back home. That's what happened this weekend in Lagos as the Chinese government marked 4 occasions in one. The national days of both Nigeria and China, which fall on October 1st, China marking 73 years and Nigeria marking 63. The Mid-Autumn Festival, the 20th anniversary of the Chinese Enterprises Association established in Nigeria, CICEA for short, and the inauguration of the 4th session of the association. Amidst the declarations signifying joint partnerships between both countries, the Chinese Consul General in Lagos, Yan Yuting, welcomed the guests in Chinese.
业委员会主席 Mr. Anidang Dolabo Bagus.
She would later speak on cooperation and partnerships between the two countries.
Nigeria is a very important strategic partner of China, and our two countries developed in many areas, just like political and economic and people-to-people exchange. So I really will that our cooperation and economic and people-to-people exchange will strengthen in the future.
The hall is filled with members of the Chinese community in Lagos and their Nigerian friends. The Minister of State Steel Development, Uba Megari Ahmadu, representing the Vice President, Kashim Shettima, not only extolled the relationship between the two countries, but pointed out China's role in development and industrialization.
China's enduring support has significantly contributed to Nigeria's advancement across various facets of national development, encompassing technology, infrastructure, science, steel production, marine affairs, and the blue economy, among others.
The Gombe State Governor, who was represented by the Deputy Governor, Dr. Manasseh Jato, presented more opportunities for partnerships.
We are sure that if we meet serious investors like we have from China, we will all partner to see that we collaborate to facilitate technological transfer, but for immediate use to create employment, improve the economic standing of the state, and also revenue to the state, apart from what the investors will really benefit.
The event closed with activities showcasing Chinese culture, which delighted the crowd. Amarachi Ubani, Channel Television News.
That's the world today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Jackie Rogers. Bye for now.